Good morning from Paris. My name is John Crowley. I'm Chief of Section for UNESCO's Section for Research Policy and Foresight in the Social and Human Sciences sector, and I'm responsible for the Secretariat of UNESCO's Management of Social Transformations program. And in that capacity, it's a great pleasure to be participating today in the opening of the Globalistics 2020 Congress. I've been discussing the planning of this Congress for many months with Ilya Ilyin and Yuri Sayamov, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity they're giving to me and through me to UNESCO to participate actively in this very important discussion, along with our partners, the World Academy of Arts and Sciences and the Club of Rome, and I really welcome the opportunity to work closely with them as well. Needless to say, for a program called Management of Social Transformations, this kind of discussion is extremely important. Even before the current pandemic situation, which leads us to radically new ways of working, we were discussing the ways in which a program like the MOST program needed to reconsider some of its parameters to take account of the way in which the world is transforming itself. MOST was created, as many of you may know, in the 1990s to respond to a certain phase of transformation of the world. Many of the transformations that took place in the 1990s are still playing out. They haven't gone away. But overlaid on top of them, a whole series of processes, technological, social, environmental, geopolitical, have arisen that make it necessary to reconsider the nature of transformations, the nature of the global within our understanding of social transformations in new ways. And of course, on top of that arrives now a health situation which is in many ways unprecedented, not so much the pandemic itself, which is definitely not unprecedented. In many ways, the whole history of humanity is, among other things, the history of our interactions with viruses and other kinds of invisible pathogens, but in the way it's been dealt with. For the first time, perhaps, we have been confronted with this strange situation of a genuinely global emergency unfolding in slow motion, which means that we are thinking about our responses, thinking about the meaning of the situation we are in as the pandemic is unfolding, and looking forward to a timeline that's very unclear, during which perhaps for the next 6, 12, 18 months or beyond, the question of living with pandemic risks in new forms will be at the heart of policy challenges in every country and globally, but also in the heart of a new way of envisaging what it is to form a society. I was recently involved in a very interesting television debate that raised some interesting questions about whether, at the time we are now in this pandemic, a couple of months into its unfolding at the global level, it is appropriate or wise or prudent to stay in or to go out. I'll be very happy in the course of the discussions to share more information about this debate with you and allow you to watch it on social media if you're interested. And one of the striking things about the debate, which echoes the national debates in many countries of the world, is the extent to which everything has been phrased in terms of a conflict or a contrast between health and the economy. Stay in if you want to protect health, and if you care about that more than the economy. Go out if you want to save the economy, and if you care more about that than about public health. But is human life just about being healthy and working hard? What is it to live in a society in which our prime duty is to stay healthy and our essential right is the right to go out to work? Doesn't that leave a lot of human existence out of the picture? Which underlines the extent to which our challenges of understanding in the face of the global transformations of the pandemic, which are connected to global transformations that were unfolding even well before the pandemic, are about not just defining how systems work, defining the ways in which pandemics as social phenomena unfold on the back of the biomedical processes by which viruses infect humans, but also about making sense of the situation, defining the values with which we need to face this situation, defining the ways in which policy trade-offs might be made that make sense in terms of the human communities that need to live with them. In other words, defining a self-understanding of contemporary human societies as connected to the pandemic circumstances, and at the same time making sense of the system within which particular kinds of policy responses will need to be adopted in more or less explicit ways to deal with the pandemic and the attendant risks. In particular, of course, if there is no solution. And like many so-called wicked policy problems, this pandemic doesn't have an obvious solution. There are ways of dealing with it, but none of them make it go away. They are all ways of living with pandemic risk rather than finding ways of living without the pandemic risk. This is just an illustration, but of course a very timely one, because it's precisely the moment in which we open this meeting. And I think it gives the tone for many of the discussions that will take place over the next days. And I will have the pleasure of participating actively in the rest of the meeting. I'll be contributing to the moderation of a session. And on Friday, I've been very generously offered the opportunity to make a whole lecture on the subject. So I don't want to expand on the substance now. Just say how happy I am on behalf of UNESCO and also in my personal capacity to be so closely involved with this meeting, how delighted I am to be able to give substance in this way to the strong cooperation between the MOST program and the UNESCO chair on global processes and ethical challenges at the State University of Moscow in the name of Lomonosov. And thank you all for being here, virtually, of course. And I look forward actively and live this time to participating in the discussions, and I hope identifying some new paths for how we can refine our concepts and our methods, and perhaps also our modes of institutional cooperation to respond to the challenges, not just of this pandemic, but of the world in which a pandemic like this turned out to be possible. Thank you, and I look forward to the rest of the discussions.